so much for joining us today. My name is Haley and I'm the Hope for HIE social worker, and I have Brandon and Susie here with me today. They are two of our peer support mentors. Today, we're going to be talking about a very popular topic in our HIE community. We're going to talk about sleep and HIE. So, Brandon and Susie, if you want to introduce yourself and share a little bit about your family and your journey with HIE, and then we'll get started. Do you want to go first, Brandon?
Sure. My name is Brandon, and I live with my wife Anna, my son Vernon, near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And my son is about 4.5 years old. He was born 4 months premature and acquired HIE shortly after birth while in the NICU. Spent about 6 months there, and then since then he's been diagnosed with CP, CVI, epilepsy, and obviously sleep disorder.
Hi, I'm Susie. My son is Oliver. He's 8 years old. He had his HIE injury during his birth, and since has been diagnosed with pretty much the full laundry list of HIE related conditions. He has CP, epilepsy, nonverbal, non-ambulatory, and several other things, and definitely a pretty serious sleep disorder.
Thank you both for sharing. I know everyone's going to be very excited to hear all the great information and tips that you have just for navigating, how to manage when your child is not sleeping. So navigating changing sleep patterns and not getting enough sleep, we all know is very tough. What we want to do today is just support you and discuss ways to cope and navigate and to help you feel less alone. This is just a place to get support and get information. We obviously are not medical professionals. No one here is going to be giving any medical advice, just sharing advice as parents in the HIA community with other parents. So first, if you each would share a little bit about the resources and supports that you have utilized throughout your journey so far with HIE, things such as nursing, whether that's night nursing, day nursing, a family friend, partner support, community support, and kind of how that's helped you with your journey.
Yeah, we do have a script for nursing. We got that script about probably 6 or 8 months after being home, but it took about a year to find our first nurse. And since then, it's been very spotty. So there are times when we have zero nursing help. There are times when we have meaningful help. And other than that, my wife's father and brother, both of her brothers, have been as supportive as they can be. But they've got a lot going on in their lives as well. Obviously, they can only help so much. And there's been a few family friends that have been willing to help out here and there. But the biggest resource is just my wife and I sharing the duty. And yeah.
Yeah, we have never had a script for night nursing, unfortunately, despite a lot of trying to get that. But we have really never had any help. And in the night times, it's just my husband and I. We waited about a year after his birth before we medicated him. And it just got to the point where we were so delirious and desperate for sleep that medication was our only option at that point. So I would say, we don't have many supports. We don't live near family. We don't have anyone that comes in to help us in the night times. But medication that has continuously had to be tweaked and, made a cocktail of drugs is what pretty much gets us through. And the fact that my husband can take a lot more sleep deprivation than I can. He's taken a pretty big hit for us in the last few years, especially.
Thank you both for sharing. Many times, there may not be a long-term answer or a long-term solution when you're navigating sleep. It'll, likely ebb and flow, and there are going to be periods of more sleep and periods of less sleep. And obviously, I know y'all will share about when your child is sleeping, it can also be hard for you to get some sleep because, of stress, mental health, having other priorities. So if you could share a little bit about how you've navigated that, that would be great.
So when my son first started to have sleeping disorders, he was probably only sleeping about 2 to 3 hours a night, probably for the first year or two, and it has gotten a little bit better. But like you said, Haley, there are certainly periods of time where it's like, wow, he's doing an okay job, and then it seems like as you alluded to, Susie, we found that perfect mixture of medicines to help him sleep, and then it outgrows that, and we're sort of back to square one with that. So that's been challenging to manage the hopes and the expectations of, is this getting better? Seems to, and then gets worse. And it just is chronically something that I feel like we're sort of playing a game of whack-a-mole with sleep, as far as trying to find the right meds or the right ways to cope with that. Um,
Yeah, our Oliver's sleep definitely ebbs and flows also. It's one of the aspects that I think people don't understand when you have a medically complex child about like colds and illnesses. It's like even just a little sniffle will throw his sleep off for 2, 3 weeks, a month, because of the secretions and not being able to manage them, and just like simple things, throw him for a loop, sleep wise. So yeah, it's definitely a game of whack-a-mole for sure. That's a good way to put it. Just always having to tweak the cocktail or tweak the sleeping arrangements, and just keep experimenting to see what works. And that's not easy to do year after year. I think it the sleep situation takes a toll on the whole family, and even when you go through periods where your child is actually sleeping, your brain gets trained to be awake all night, be listening to breathing, to choking, like, wondering if they're going to wake up. And that's something that my nervous system went through uh pretty significantly. Was just, I lost my ability to sleep even if he was sleeping, because I was always on high alert, and it, like, any noise at all would just wake my brain up and send me into like this state of panic. And then once you get all that adrenaline rushing, then you can't go back to sleep. And so it's definitely a holistic problem for the whole family when one of the kids, has sleep disorder. So I'm glad that we're here and we're talking about it, because it can be pretty isolating and maddening, the sleep disorder journey.
if I
Sure.
could just throw on top of that too,
Yeah.
you made me think, Susie, that you have a lot of people that say, oh, your child's sleeping so you can get sleep, and the reality is, it just, during the day that never seems to work, and during the night you're totally right about how it affects you, and also just um, yeah, you don't just put your child to bed and immediately fall asleep. There's all that adrenaline to wind down, and there's a household to manage and all that. So
Yes, definitely. Thank you both for sharing. I know that you both have sort of talked a little bit about medication, and whether that's medication for your child, medication to help you sleep, things like that. So if you could just share a little bit about that, and then a little bit about the feelings or surrounding medication that can sometimes happen, whether that's guilt, feeling, like, is this a good option for my family? That would be great.
we started. We were pretty slow, like Susie mentioned, to begin medicating, especially for sleep. There was a lot of guilt about it, and a lot of guilt about how could this affect my son's ability to interact and to develop and to engage with his world. Plus, just feeling like he's my son. I don't want him to be drugged out. I don't want to just turn to that easy answer, which isn't really an easy answer, but it certainly felt that way in the beginning. Um, and it's one of those things where once we started to find that perfect blend, it really did improve his quality of life as well as ours. And I would say to someone that's struggling to feel like, is it wrong? Struggling with the feeling of guilt. Um, I totally, my wife, if she were here, totally would understand and agree with. We felt that way, but it ended up allowing him to be more engaged because he was better rested. Um, so it is one of those. one of those things that seems sort of counterintuitive, but it ends up helping at the end of the day.
Sure. Thank you for sharing about that. And I know, we've also talked about how many solutions may only work short term. You may need to change the plans a lot, and that a lot of families in our community have had to do that. And I know Susie had mentioned, sickness, a schedule change, hospital stays. So if you could share a little bit about kind of some of those things that just, happen in life and how you've been able to sort of navigate through that and, some of the things that have helped you and your family.
Yeah, I mean, going to the hospital totally gets the schedule off track. Changes with um, you mentioned sickness, trying to fine tune that mixture of medicines, and you find that then all of a sudden he's maybe sleeping during the day when there's no ability for my wife or I to catch up on sleep at that point. And it turns into this cyclical cycle. And I think part of that is I don't have a great answer to that. It's just the reality of it. It's very challenging. But I would also say part of the things that we've had to learn is to sort of be maybe a little bit more aggressive as parents about protecting whenever we can. Obviously, we can't pick when he's sick. If he has to go in the hospital, he has to go in. But even when you're in there, really advocating hard to try and maintain the best schedule possible. Or as there's anything that we can control, not not being too passive about saying no to certain things to make sure that when he's on a good schedule, that he's able to stick to that the best he can.
Sure. And then we also have talked, want to talk a little bit about, you guys both have talked about it, just the feelings of isolation surrounding when everyone in the home is not sleeping and when your child's not sleeping. So if you could just share a little bit about, how you've navigated that and some things that may have helped.
Um, yeah, the one of the very isolating things, especially in the beginning, was hearing from a lot of other parents, "Oh yeah, doesn't sleep well either," or "Yeah, my son, he struggles to fall asleep," and feeling like they don't understand. Um, a lot of parents with neurotypical kids, they may have some sleep issues, but it's nothing like the consistently getting 2, 3, 4 hours night after night after night, and what that does. So that alone can be very isolating. Just the feeling of does anyone understand? And I think part of what I appreciate about things like this is the chance to hear that there are actually people that go through these sort of sleep issues, and the feelings that we've talked about, guilt about medication, and just the frustration and the anxiety, even that is produced by all that, is normal when you're going through that kind of sleep deprivation. Not that that is a very normal thing to go through, but it's real. Um, and then also just feeling isolated because I think it impacts the ability to do certain social things, because of the tiredness, or because of the need to try and protect my child's sleep schedule.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely the exhaustion is a huge part of the isolation. It's like, people um think they know about the torture of sleep deprivation, if their kid maybe, gets up a time or two a night. But I think with the medically complex, like sleep disorder, there's just so many layers to it. It's like you're up in the night processing through all this grief and guilt and like, did I do something wrong? Am I, I hate these drugs. Like, why does he need drugs? Like, why can't he just sleep? What's wrong? Like, how do I fix it? What's the root cause? And it's like your mind is just racing all night trying to fix this thing that can't be fixed. And you go through all the emotions of that, like every night, sometimes. And it's exhausting on like a soul level. It's like deeply exhausting. So not only are you just not physically getting rest, but your mind just can't rest. And like the night is just it's dark. You're alone, you're in your head, you're dealing with this very difficult thing. And I think that the emotional toll of that is not something that's really talked about or recognized enough. Because without the sleep, it's like you can't be a functional person in the world, and you can't advocate like you need to for your kid, and all these regular things become, they just eventually feel impossible when your child's going through, those periods of terrible sleep. So for me, it yeah, it's emotionally isolating as well as physically.
Thank you both for sharing. We want to talk a little bit about, with our little bit of time we have, about how to cope with this and some things that have helped to navigate this, because as we've talked about, this sleep journey is ebbing and flowing and changing, and it can last for a very long time. And so at some point, have to take a minute to just say, okay, what am I going to do to be able to make it through this, and, to be able to do the things that my family and I, want to do. So it's just important that you support yourself. I know both of you have kind of shared about things that you've done, and just different, everyone has a different level of resources available to them and support available to them. So I think it's important to mention, to recognize that we all have a limit, and whatever limit you have, do what you can with that, because we all do live in different areas, have different amounts of support. So if you guys just want to share a little bit about what have you done in those times where, you've really needed sleep, but kind of the schedule's not allowing it, or things are not allowing. So how have you been able to, try to do some things to get, even if it's just physical rest and maybe not full sleep?
Well, you mentioned using the resources you have. And I would say that'd be the first thing, is just learning to recognize that it's so much better to sort of tap into whatever resource you can before you reach that breaking point. And I understand not everyone has as many resources. You may not have that, but whatever you do have, that at least something that my wife and I both, she sort of reached her breaking point and called on me. But at that point, she was so sleep deprived. And then for a long time, I just, every single night, to try and give her the chance to recover until I reached my breaking point, and the need to recognize that before you cross that limit, just because it's so hard you can't really recover because you're not getting good sleep. So utilizing those resources is really important, and being willing to say no. I mean, we sort of already talked about that in terms of how it can be isolating, but also just recognizing that, there are things that I'm more of a morning person, and I've had to just learn to sleep in sometimes, and give up on certain activities I'd want to do in the morning, or even getting a later start to my day, just to try and get just an extra 30, 40 minutes, if that's what I can get. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon and I are both privileged to have partners that we rely on to be able to switch off. And I recognize that that's not everybody's situation. And it's really hard when you don't have, that second person that you can be like, I can't do it anymore. Can you take over? So I just want to acknowledge that, because, it's a privilege to have two caregivers in the home able to split the burden, of sleep deprivation. But I do rely on my husband a lot, because like I said, he can take more of the sleep deprivation than I can. But also at different points throughout our journey, I've had to take medication myself to kind of retrain my brain, because we'll go through a really hard period and my brain will just get in that. It's like I have a sleep disorder now also, and so does my husband, because we've been woken up and put into these stress states for 8 straight years. And so I mean, the medication thing for me was really hard to allow in, because I had a lot of judgment around that. I had a lot of guilt, and I was just, always trying to find like a natural way to deal with it. But I think that for me, recognizing when that was not working and being willing to accept a different option, even if it wasn't the most ideal option, you know, like medications have helped us survive the 8 years that we've been, you know, doing this. So I think that, like Brandon said, it's like you have to just be open to whatever resources that you have available, even if they're not ideal. You know, it's hard to let people in your home at night. It's hard to say yes to night nursing. It's hard to lose that privacy. It's hard to ask for help or, you know, those types of things. But you, it's the best way to survive a journey like this is to just welcome in whatever resources that are available to you.
That's such important information to share. And I know some of the other things we talked about as we were preparing for today is just being selfish with your time. And then I know y'all had mentioned, you know, if you're not able to get like overnight rest or, you know, full sleep, some of the ways that you can get physical rest. So if you want to, if you would share just a little bit about different ways you have been selfish with your time or how you've navigated, you know, caring for your child, but also getting some of that physical rest.
Yeah, one piece of advice that I got sort of early on from a parent who is many years ahead in that journey was you have to be very selective about the hobbies, the activities, the things when you get a chance to do something that's not taking care of your child, working. There's not very many of those. And so, whatever it is, to make sure it's something that's going to recharge you mentally, ideally, emotionally, certainly, and physically if you can. So, yeah, I've found that exercise is very cathartic for my emotions, good for my mental clarity, and it helps me to sleep a little bit better. So, yeah, I'm sure everyone's got different activities. You know, my wife, when she can, taking a relaxing bath, um, you know, if you're able to get a massage, things like that, that are both physically, mentally, and emotionally restorative may not be what I necessarily want to do with my time, um, but it's what I need to do to to survive. And I think you said mentioned that, Susie, that, you know, surviving. I think realizing that when you're not sleeping, your family really is in a survival mode, and that's okay. I mean, it's okay to be in that mode of I've got to survive because it's incredibly taxing. I mean, beyond words. Um, so whatever you have to do.
Yeah, I agree. For me, uh, a lot of my strategy around caring for myself within a sleep disorder situation is about learning to have grace, which is a topic that I've talked about many times before on these discussions, because, you know, you go through periods where it's like, people are like, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, care for yourself well. And sometimes you go through periods where it's like, you do not have the wherewithal to do anything functional for yourself. And I think, you know, at first it was really hard for me to recognize that and set clear boundaries and set aside obligations and choose myself. It's taken a long time to learn to do that, but I'm glad that I am learning that, because it's really helped, you know, to if I have 25 unreturned text messages at the end of the day, okay, well, they're not going to get returned. It's like sometimes you have to just be selfish with that small amount of energy that you have, and just, you know, do what you need to do to survive. If that's watching a stupid show on Netflix at night because your brain needs that mental break, it's like that's okay. You know, if it's whatever, going for a walk in the woods or hibernating in some way, it's like I think you just have to flow with your own abilities, you know, and try to not rake yourself over the coals for whatever you're choosing in that moment to survive this, because it's really hard.
And I love that you guys both talked about that because it's important to have patience with yourself, give yourself grace and kindness, and realize that what you may have planned, you know, for that day or that week or what have you, that month may not get done. So what are the absolutes, what are the hopeful things, and what are the things, you know what, that's not even on the table right now to handle, because you do have to be able to change course very quickly and adapt very quickly when things change with your child. Lastly, before we close the recorded portion of this meeting, we really just want to highlight a lot of the resources with Hope for HIE and the way that you can connect with other families to share, because we really just don't want parents to feel alone. And we get a lot of comments about navigating sleep, and it's very frustrating, and just what do I do? And we just want to make sure you feel that you have a place in our community where we are here to support you. So our support groups, they're all on Zoom platform. You don't need childcare for your kids. This is also why we do this peer perspective series. This is recorded. So for all the families who are not able to be here for any of these series, they're recorded and later posted on our YouTube channel. So you can watch that at 4 in the morning. You can watch it at 2 in the afternoon, whatever time works for you and your family. We have a peer support mentorship program. Brandon and Susie are part of that program. We have many other peer support mentors. Lean into that. Get that one-on-one support from someone who's been there, if that will help you in your journey. We have a child life specialist, Annie. She's phenomenal. Please utilize her resources. She can help you navigate this journey with your child. And we have plenty of Facebook groups. So if either of you would just share a little bit about the resources that you have found helpful before we open up to the non-recorded portion.
Yeah, it's really great just to know there are other parents out there. Susie, even just when we were preparing for this, just to talk to you, and it's one more person. And wow, I'm not the only one whose child doesn't sleep and who feels like I'm going insane sometimes from it. So being willing to try and reach out and make those connections, and it's not always easy to find. There's not a flashing billboard of, oh, here's people whose children don't sleep. But I think Hope for HIE does make it easy to find some people that do understand what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I agree. I felt the same way about our little prep time that we had for this meeting. It's like, it's so validating to hear someone else say all of the things that you think, so I would just encourage anyone who feels isolated to, connect within the support group or connect with a peer mentor. Because I mean, sometimes even your doctors they don't have a real lived experience of what you're going through. And for me, in everything, in every aspect of HIE, it's like the validation is the medicine for us caregivers. It's like, okay, I'm not alone in this. I'm not just totally screwing it up. This is, a real struggle that many in our community share. So whichever aspect of the support group feels safe and supportive to you, the Zoom meetings or the support groups or one-on-one, that all of those things have been useful to me in different parts of the journey.
And as we close the recording for today, I just want to thank Brandon and Susie so much for agreeing to be on this panel and to be open and transparent and sharing all about your sleep journey. And so we just thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today.